It is May 1940, and the British and French armies are facing total collapse. Over 300,000 troops are trapped on the beaches of Dunkirk, pinned between the English Channel and an advancing German army. Just weeks earlier, these were the most powerful militaries on the planet. How did they lose the entire continent so quickly? While the Allies planned for the slow, defensive maneuvers of the previous war, the German military operated at a tempo they weren't prepared to match. To understand why the Allies were so easily outpaced, we have to look at the decade of desperation that led to this moment. The 1919 Treaty of Versailles established the rules for the post-war world. It held Germany entirely responsible for the losses of World War I, demanding a fine that, in today's currency, equals roughly $270 billion. The payment schedule for this debt was designed to last generations. Germany didn't make the final installment on this fine until 2010, nearly a century after the war ended. By 1923, the weight of this debt caused hyperinflation that rendered the German currency worthless. A loaf of bread that cost 160 marks in 1922 reached a price of 200 billion marks just a year later. With the economy in ruins and millions of people unemployed, the German public became increasingly receptive to the radical promises of Adolf Hitler. The combination of deep financial debt and domestic collapse created a void that a message of national resurgence could easily fill. As Hitler began reclaiming territory, Allied leaders attempted to control his ambitions through a series of diplomatic agreements. The most famous was the Munich Agreement, where territories were conceded in exchange for a written promise that there would be no more war. While diplomacy continued, France spent years building the Maginot Line, a 450-kilometer wall of concrete bunkers and fortifications designed to stop any German invasion before it could enter French soil. Wieston's strategies, diplomatic treaties, and static walls relied on the assumption that the next war fought as slowly as the last. In September 1939, that assumption was tested when Hitler invaded Poland. This was the debut of a military strategy called Blitzkrieg. The strategy relied on armored tank divisions that could strike deep into enemy territory before a traditional defense could even be organized. These ground forces were closely coordinated with the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, which provided overwhelming support from the sky. To sustain this pace, the German High Command distributed millions of doses of Pervitin to its soldiers, a drug known today as crystal meth. This diagram compares the two armies. While the Allied forces halted for 8 hours of sleep each night, the German army, fueled by stimulants, was capable of advancing continuously. It allowed them to fight for days without rest, essentially bypassing the biological limits of their opponents. This combined mechanical and biological speed hit the continent with a force the Allied armies were unable to process. By May 1940, the Allies positioned their best troops in Belgium, expecting an attack there while the Maginot Line guarded the southern border. Instead of a collision, Hitler bypassed the wall entirely, funneling 40,000 vehicles through the Ardennes forest, a region experts labeled impassable for tanks. German divisions moved through the woods in secret, emerging behind the Allied lines and cutting off their path to the rest of the country. This maneuver trapped the British and French armies against the coast, forcing the desperate retreat to the beaches of Dunkirk. By June 1940, Hitler's army had forced the surrender of Poland, Norway, Denmark, Belgium, the Netherlands, and France. The collapse of the continent forced the resignation of Neville Chamberlain. He was replaced by Winston Churchill, who inherited a country on the brink of invasion. With France out of the war, Italy's Mussolini joined the conflict as an ally of Germany, consolidating Axis control over almost all of Europe. The soldiers at Dunkirk had been saved, but the old world's way of fighting was gone. Britain now stood entirely alone against a brutal war machine that moved faster than anything they had ever seen. Survival now meant finding a way to stop it.